Hello, and welcome to the Mastermind series, where every month we learn from the wisdom of leading authors, trainers, and innovators. This is your host, Andrew Barber-Starkey, and I'm really excited about our guest today. I consider this man to be one of the grandfathers of the human potential movement in North America. Like many of the greatest experts, he's also extremely modest about his accomplishments. His official bio tells me that he has his doctorate in clinical psychology with degrees from UCLA and University of Denver. It talks about the fact that he's president of the Canadian Society of Clinical Hypnosis and does a tremendous amount of training for professionals. Further, it tells me that he's written 2 books, Miracles and Other Realities being one, and the other called Beyond Hypnosis. What his bio does not mention, but I happen to know, is that he is recognized worldwide as an expert in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. He has studied with some of the greatest masters of our time, including studying hypnosis with Milton Erickson, father of Ericksonian hypnosis. He also specializes in sports psychology and has worked with and taught visualization techniques to numerous Olympic athletes and professional sporting teams, including the Vancouver Canucks and the Edmonton Oilers. He's taught literally hundreds of corporate seminars for Fortune 500 companies and has produced 2 best-selling tape series for Nightingale Conant, one called The Power of Visualization and the other called Mentally Fit Forever. This man is also an entrepreneur. Back in 1970, he and his brothers started the Old Spaghetti Factory, a restaurant chain which ultimately expanded to 22 restaurants in 3 countries. He served as the chief operating officer and helped create one of the best bottom lines in history before selling out to the keg restaurants 10 years later. You'd think with all this experience and training that he'd be an old guy, but nothing could be further from the truth. I've met him personally several times, and he's just a picture of energy and youthfulness. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today, Dr. Lee Pulos. Morning, Lee.
Good morning, Andrew. I don't know about grandfather. I don't feel like a grandfather, but...
Well, the reason I say that, honestly, is because I'm certainly a student of the human potential movement, and many of the things I've read and speakers and tape series that I've heard refer to your work, and it's certainly been foundational and influential on many people.
No, I was just teasing you. I know that I've done a lot of work with a lot of people, and I have to shake my head some days when I look at my age. I can't believe it.
Well, as I mentioned, having met you, you just seem like you're the same generation as me. It feels like, and yet you have so much experience and so many results to your credit. So it's just a delight to have you today, Dr. Pulos. I would love to hear a little bit about your background and the pieces that led you to be where you are today and what you learned along the way. So would you be willing to share some of that with us?
Well, of course. I always at every talk I give credit to my teachers. And, of course, having started off in the restaurant business, the Spaghetti Factory, I knew nothing about the restaurant business, and my managers were my teachers. Secondly, I do a lot of cancer counseling, and in order to be a successful cancer survivor, you have to have certain qualities, and I've learned a lot from my cancer patients, and many of whom, of course, are doing visualization. And the third source, of course, comes from my work in clinical psychology, sports psychology. I started off working with the Canadian national volleyball team and with Vic Lindahl, who was just recently appointed to the Volleyball Hall of Fame. And I started off with them, and I didn't really know much. And so the athletes became my teachers. And I've learned a lot. I've worked with the Oilers, the Canucks, the Canadian ski team, and so on and so on, over 300 athletes over the years. So they've become my teachers. And what I'm doing is taking what they teach me and then extrapolate it back into the kinds of things that they want to learn.
Well, we have over 400 Success Track members that will be receiving this tape, and what I'm taking from what you're saying is that for all of them, as they're going through their businesses, doing whatever they're doing, that they're not just learning from Harv Eker and from experts like yourself, but that really the situations they face every day and the clients they deal with every day are the ones they can learn from.
Well, Andrew, I guess people frequently ask me, have you ever been tense before a talk? Well, yes. I was doing a 4-day seminar for the Canucks over in Vancouver Island, and just prior to my talk, I was introduced to an old Hall of Famer, and he didn't believe in psychology. And I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to get these guys' attention? So after the introductions, I asked the players. There were about 80 of them there, the farm club and coaches and all that. What percentage of hockey is mental? And the guys put up their hands, 60, 80%. And I said, wonderful. What percentage of your time do you use on the mental? And no one would look me in the eye. And I think that captured the essence of it. And I'll ask your listeners the same question. What percentage of your success is mental, and how much time do you spend on the mental? So I really feel that, the more we can create certain kinds of mental software, then we can use that to program desired outcomes, goals, etc.
Mm-hmm. So obviously one of the things we'll get to in a few minutes is talking about some of the techniques people can use for visualization and how they can apply it specifically. And really the specialty, I guess, that we're going to focus on today, you have so many of them, it seems, but my thought is that we're going to focus on the visualization aspect of things and how that can influence the people's progress towards success.
Exactly.
That's your idea?
Yes, and we'll see where that takes us.
Great. Well, actually, it's a great time to be talking about visualization because, of course, the Olympics are on at the moment. And one of the things that's really over and over again we hear and even see on television is how the Olympic athletes are using the power of visualization and how it helps them. So maybe that would be just a place to start.
Well, I'm sure that many of your listeners have watched the Olympics and noticed, particularly the divers, before executing their dive, they'll close their eyes and stand there for maybe 20 seconds, mentally rehearsing the outcome of what they want to do. And actually, the former world champion Olympic medalist Greg Louganis used to attributes all of his successes, all of his medals, to visualization. But what he would do is have someone photograph him in slow motion as he was executing his drives, and he would put that to music, and then he would sort of mentally rehearse what he was seeing on the video and the music, so that when he was executing his dive, he had done it 100 times, so the 101st time was a slam dunk.
So how does that really condition them and benefit them for a better performance?
Well, I think what you're doing when you're visualizing is that you're laying neurological tracks over and over and over again. And the more neurological tracks you can lay, providing it's done properly, the easier it becomes to execute. And it also builds up your confidence level because you've done it 100 times, let's say, and then the 101st time it becomes easy.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned working with cancer patients, and a year or so ago I saw Dr. Carl Simonton speak when he was in Vancouver, and he uses visualization so powerfully. Can you talk a little bit about the visualization in healing?
Well, yes. I mean, it goes back, actually. Dr. Simonton, we were on a program together some years ago, and what he doesn't mention, of course, is that he got his ideas from taking a Silva mind control course. And Silva was a master hypnotist and a high-order Rosicrucian. Now, the Rosicrucians, which are kind of a mystical society that goes back over 1,500 years, have been using visualization. And Jose Silva then took some of those concepts and interpolated it into his course, which Simonton took. And then he began using visualization with his cancer patients, and, of course, the rest is history. I do much the same thing, although I've added a lot of new kind of twists and turns. But almost every cancer patient I see wants to have more control in their lives. For instance, just a short while ago, I saw a 62-year-old woman with a large colon tumor, and she was scheduled for surgery in 3 weeks. And she said, "Lee, I know I can get this tumor down." Anyway, she happened to be an excellent hypnotic subject. Her imagery was little white sharks coming in and eating away the tumor, and she did that faithfully 2-3 times a day. Well, when she went in for her surgery, the tumor had shrunk by almost a half, and the surgery was uneventful. Those are the kinds of things. But there's other things about visualization, Andrew. Some people are primarily visual, which is about 70% of the population. Some people are mostly kinesthetic, which means they don't see very well, but they feel. Like yesterday, I had a patient a cancer patient actually, who didn't do good on the visual. But the moment she began feeling the imagery, all of a sudden things began to happen. And of course, 10% of the population are auditory. So it's important to kind of know or sense what your primary visual modality is, so that you don't become frustrated when you try to visualize if you're a kinesthetic person, because it will not quite work as well.
So what you're saying really is visualizing, which in our mind brings up the thought of picturing things, but in actual fact it can be equally effective imaging things kinesthetically or auditorially?
Exactly. And of course, when you visualize, I try to get people to bring in all three brains. For instance, the left brain, metaphorically, is the verbal brain. So you want to have affirmations, positive affirmations. And then the right brain is the visual brain. So you'll create a mental picture to go with the visual, with the verbal affirmations. But the most important brain of all is the limbic system, the emotional brain. And that's where the juice comes from. That's where the energy comes from, the feelings of what it would be like to achieve a certain outcome. So I have people programming with all three brains, words, pictures, and feelings. And then that just adds almost exponentially to the success of the outcome.
So whenever we're being told by experts to how to do affirmations or to doing any kind of visualization, they always talk about the emotional element. And one of the things that I got from your tape series I found quite interesting was what you called the cognitive dissonance. That when you're saying an affirmation and it's something that's not true, there's a tension created. And I always use that as a reason in a way to believe that while these things don't work, they're not true. But in the tape series, you say no, that contributes to the change. Could you talk about that?
Well, yes. What you want to do is reduce the subconscious cannot stand dissonance. So if you're saying, let's say you want to lose weight, and you weigh 200 pounds, you want to weigh 150. So as you're visualizing and verbalizing, I now look good and feel good at 150 pounds, that creates dissonance in the subconscious. So you're mobilizing it to do whatever it can to reduce the dissonance between reality and what you're programming. So the whole purpose of visualization is to re-educate, reprogram the subconscious with new belief scripts. And see, another assumption about creating success or certain outcomes is that belief always precedes reality. Always. So what we want to do is, again, reduce the dissonance, the cognitive dissonance between our beliefs and our reality. And that's what, programming, visualization, hypnosis, whatever your choice of programs is, they all work in the same way. And this goes back, thousands of years. It is not anything new. King Solomon, 4,000 years ago, said, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." And on and on. At Vancouver General and the Cancer Control Agency, they now have a room where people can go in and put on a set of headphones and be guided into visualizing certain outcomes to work with the medical treatment. In other words, what we're doing is creating mental software to program the hardware of the body.
Mm-hmm. And to go back to the beginning about the cognitive dissonance, I guess my thought always was, well, we're going to reprogram, we're going to kind of write over the old program, but in a way what you're saying is it's the contrast between the old program and the new one that actually creates this tension in our unconscious mind, and that's what brings us towards the new affirmation or the
exactly.
New, oh, okay.
That's it. And people frequently ask, well, gee, Lee, how long does it take to change old scripts? And I guess I think back to a piece of research that was done in the 30s where a psychologist by the name of Slater created a pair of glasses. It was a perceptual study. And if you put the glasses on, the whole world looked upside down. And it was very difficult for people to get around. And it took about 3 weeks before the neurons reconfigured into new neural pathways so the person with the upside-down glasses could negotiate his or her way in the world. However, when you took the glasses off, again, the world looked awful, and people had difficulty in walking in a right-side-up world. It took another 3 weeks for the neurons to reconfigure into new neural pathways so people could negotiate. And I think that's a pretty apt metaphor for programming, that we have to do it on a regular basis with the belief and expectation that it's going to work, trusting ourselves enough. See, there are three tools that will awaken and mobilize our slumbering giant, the subconscious. Desire. You have to have passion, and it has to be your passion, not someone else's. Secondly, imagination, visualization, and mental rehearsal, whatever you want to call it. And thirdly, expectation, expecting that what you're going to do is going to work. And those are the three tools that have been around since millennia. And almost every culture, no matter what culture, are using the same approaches.
Well, when you talk about expectation, that's such a difficult one because, of course, our expectations are so much set by what we've experienced in the past,
mm-hmm.
and that becomes our foundation. And what I've discovered in myself personally is that as I become more successful, and I've done a tremendous amount of work and changed and grown over the years, that my expectations change not at an intellectual level, not in my mind, but in my body. I mean, I really do expect different things. So how do we change those expectations in ourselves at the deeper level, not just in what we think we want to expect?
Well, I think one thing, we have to release the past. And I have a metaphor for that. I see every person in the world as a beautiful Caribbean cruise ship. And we've got wonderful charts, good companions, great food. We can go anywhere in the world. But many people's cruise ship has a metaphoric cable on the rear, on the stern of it, towing an old barge filled with rusting junk, their past. And many people would rather spend time on the barge breathing life into the junk or polishing the junk so that it continues to become their future instead of spending time on the bridge creating a future. So we've got to release the past. That is critical. But the power of expectation is almost overwhelming. In a recent study with 451 women with metastatic breast cancer, half of them were given a placebo, the other half were given a new chemotherapy. Well, 30% of the women who received the placebo, the sugar pill, lost their hair. Why? They thought they were getting the chemo, and they knew that, chemo causes hair loss. And sure enough, 30% of them lost their hair. That's the power of expectation, the power of belief.
That is an amazing statistic, isn't it?
Yeah. See, the other thing, too, Andrew, is, we're trapped in the old Newtonian paradigm, which states the past creates the present. The new paradigm, the quantum paradigm, says no. The future creates the present against the backdrop of the past. And you think, well, gee, how does that work? Theoretical physicist Fred Alan Wolf, in his book Starwave, describes how every thought we have is like it's a double-action quantum wave. So ever since we were verbal, we've been lobbing out possible and probable futures. And the futures go out as a quantum wave. They're there in pure potentia. And then the moment we step into that future or breathe life into it, becomes what he calls an echo wave. Like you and I, for instance, we planned this talk, 2 weeks ago? Mm-hmm. Well, we threw out a quantum wave. It went out as a potential future. It was a possible future. Now, this morning, when you called me, we stepped into the echo wave and collapsed all the other futures. I could have forgotten about it. You could have gotten sick, etc. So every person, each one of your listeners, has hundreds of possible futures out there. Nightmare futures, mediocre futures, and the odd brilliant future. Which future do you choose to breathe life into? And that's how the future creates the present against the backdrop of the past. However, if you want to believe in victimhood, then you're a victim of your past, and you keep blaming and giving your power away to whoever.
Well, I guess what I hear you saying, or my interpretation of what you're saying, is that we're throwing out, thousands of these fireworks or whatever they are, putting out these waves, and then it's the ones that we go back over and over again that get reinforced.
Exactly.
And reinforced. So it wasn't just 2 weeks ago you and I talked about this, and then today it happened, but I looked at my calendar, and our appointment was there, and that reinforced it. And then I had your tape series, and I was reviewing that, and that reinforced it.
Exactly.
And then the pieces went back and forth, so it wasn't just a one-time event, but over and over again. So I guess what I hear you saying is that visualization can work the same way. It's just that we all know that it's something, whether it's real or not, doesn't matter to the subconscious mind.
It doesn't care.
It's there. So
in other words, you could create a future from the barge, which a lot of people do. So you get same old stuff happening over and over again. People, oh God, same thing's happening again, same thing's happening again. Or you can create a future from the bridge and sink the barge. Mm-hmm. That's a choice you make. Everything is a conscious choice. So, we like to give power to our subconscious. Say, oh, I'm a victim of my past, this and that. However, it's consciousness makes the choice. The point of power is now. There is no past. There is no future. I mean, you can try to be happy in the past right now. You can't. Try to be happy in the future. You can't. The point now is the point of power, but be motivated by the future. Keep lobbing out, positive futures, and they're all out there in pure potentia. Some are possible futures, some are probable futures, and some you'll be actualizing. Mm-hmm. So that you have the power, and the power resides within each one of us.
So let's get on to perhaps some practical application of this. We have our Success Tracks members, and they're sitting at home or in their cars, wherever they are. They're listening to this tape. Mm-hmm. They have some ideas about what they want. Some pieces that they're let's call them the whatever you call them, the potentials, the ideas that they're putting out, how do they reinforce the ones that are going to take them where they really, their heart's desire is, using visualization? What are some of the steps that they would do?
Well, again, you want to make sure that there are no underlying cross currents. I mean, let's say, what if you have, let me give you an example. One of my male friends, he believes that all women will cheat in a relationship. You say, all women? All women. You fix him up with a nice person, he'll reject her. Fix her up with another nice person, he'll find a reason, too tall, too short, whatever. But fix him up with a woman who has a bit of a history, and he'll gravitate to her like a magnet. So let's say in a month she goes out with someone else and cheats. Then he'll say, see? In other words, his belief creates the reality. This is why I said earlier, belief always precedes reality. So if you've got any subconscious cross-current beliefs, you've got to deal with those first. At least identify what they are. And there are techniques. I use a number of techniques in my office, and everything from energy testing, applied kinesiology. There are certain techniques you can use in hypnosis to find out where the cross-currents are. So it makes it a lot easier to remove the cross-currents, or at least become aware of them before you do the programming.
Okay, so and there are some techniques in the tape series on how to get clear on that. And every Success Tracks member is likely pretty familiar with this as well, because certainly Hartbecker, when he's leading his programs, is constantly talking about identifying and reframing that negative programming, what you're calling the cross purposes to where you're going. So
Right.
That would be the first step, is to know what it is.
Then what you want to do is quiet the chatter of the conscious mind. And the way you can do that through meditation, you can do it through hypnosis, you can do it through progressive relaxation, it doesn't matter. So what you want to do, because I should just take a quick sidebar here. The most powerful kind of programming is what I call waking hypnosis. And by waking hypnosis, I mean the internal chatter, the self-talk, the inner dialogue, which we do to the tune of 150 to 300 words a minute. That works out to between 45,000 and 51,000 thoughts a day. So what if you started programming a certain outcome, but your waking hypnosis kind of rubs that out? It's like writing something on the board with your right hand and following it with your left hand and erasing it. So you've also got to begin with making sure the person is aware of the way they're programming themselves with what I call waking hypnosis. That's number one.
So that's just about observing what I'm thinking, and really just a process of self-awareness.
Exactly. So that again is a conscious control matter. You can control. You can't stop the self-talk, but you can control it.
And is it fair to say that the self-talk is, in a way, a whole bunch of these waves that we're putting out that we will either go down or not?
Exactly. So if you've got negative self-talk, negative chatter going on inside your head all the time, then it's really like trying to swim against the tide by programming, because you're just undoing it as soon as you come out of your deep hypnosis or deep relaxation. Getting back to the question, and by the way, remind me to comment on how our beliefs are formed, because that's really important. I'll come back to that in just a moment. But the way I do it, and I do this every day, is at the end of the day I'll go for a power walk. But even in my power walk, I'm with my eyes open, I'm visualizing certain outcomes, and I'm supporting it with self-talk, with positive belief statements. Now, when I do the deeper stuff, I happen to be a good hypnotic subject, and I go to a fairly deep octave of consciousness. And the deeper you can go, the better, because you don't have that internal chatter to erase whatever you're programming. But then I always start off with the words, like a positive a belief statement. Then, as I keep repeating that over and over in my mind, then I bring in the visual image, the desired outcome. Then I juice that up with feelings, with joy, with excitement, with passion. And I program for 30 seconds. You should not program for more than 30 seconds at a time. Then I release it, then I do it again. Then I go on to my next goal, and so forth.
So let me just review what I've heard. So first thing is to identify our thoughts and patterns, our beliefs and programming from the past that is at cross purposes with where we want to go.
Mm-hmm.
The second is to watch our thinking, our conscious...
Our waking hypnosis.
Our waking hypnosis, the thoughts that are coming to us, which are all the possibilities which we will either follow or not,
right,
reinforce or not. And then to go from there, the third step is some way of moving into visualization, whether it's through hypnosis, whether it's through progressive relaxation or meditation.
It doesn't matter.
Quiet the mind, and then do these visualizations in 30-second hits for each goal. So if
I do it twice for each goal.
Okay.
So, and then I move on to the second goal. And right now I'm working on 4 or 5 goals. So that is the basic technique. Now, in more difficult cases, to get back to what I alluded to earlier, how are beliefs formed? How do they become set in our minds? There are 4 basic languages of the brain. Delta, which is when we're asleep. Theta is that twilight reverie state. Just as we're going into sleep or awakening in the morning, we have that really nice reverie state. Alpha is when you close your eyes and the mind kind of goes into idle. And then beta, presumably what you and I are in right now, waking state.
Yeah.
Now, between the ages of 0 and 2, the brain waves of infants are exclusively in delta, whether they're awake, gurgling, laughing, or sleeping. Then between the ages of 2 and 6, the brain waves increase in density and frequency to theta, which is 4 to 8 hertz. And these kids are in that twilight reverie state, and the brain waves reflect a highly creative state, highly imaginative state. Most kids between 2 and 6 have great imaginations. Then between the ages of 6 and 12, the brain waves amp up a little more into alpha. And, people who are long-term meditators have more alpha spikes and so forth than the average person. And that's that eyes closed meditative state. And then after the age of 12, they go into beta and so forth. Now, between the ages of 2 and 12, they're in either alpha or theta, which are the most hypnotizable, programmable brain states known to humankind. As a matter of fact, when we do hypnosis and we attach electrodes to the scalp, you get primarily theta and alpha activity, mostly in the right brain. So in other words, this is when beliefs are laid down, isn't it? This is what life is about. This is what God is about. This is what marriage is about. This is what honesty is about. And they're programmed into certain beliefs or other beliefs. Love hurts, things like that. So if you're programmed to a belief that love hurts, say this is what you've been exposed to at home, guess what? Someone fix you up with a nice person that's going to be, really sweet and kind to you, reject. Fix you up with someone who's had a horrific history and who's into battling all the time, boom, you'll gravitate to that person to support your belief that love hurts and reduce the cognitive dissonance.
So what you're saying then is that the beliefs themselves are laid very early, before we're 6 years old, but then as we go through life, we're continually gravitating towards situations which are consistent with our beliefs.
Exactly. That's why I said earlier, belief always precedes reality. Always. So if your listeners have any kind of areas in their life where there are too many speed bumps and things aren't going as well as they would like, what is the belief that is supporting that reality, that outcome? That's the key to the whole thing. And then you program the beliefs. So there's something called state-dependent learning. For example, if you learn something in a particular octave of consciousness, usually you have to go back to that octave to retrieve the memory. Example, a drunk gets absolutely sloshed on alcohol at night, and he's got a half a bottle of liquor left, so he wants to save it for the morning. He'll hide it somewhere, wakes up next morning, can't remember where he hid his bottle. He has to get drunk again to remember where he put the bottle. That's called state-dependent learning, and that's why in hypnosis we take people back to the octave of consciousness in which the beliefs were originally laid down and reprogram them in that octave of consciousness.
So how can our Success Tracks members, which are primarily entrepreneurs, getting started in their own business and trying to break the bounds of their past programming, their negative beliefs, how can they apply this piece about the importance of going back to the octave of learning?
Well, again, I think a lot of this can be done consciously. But if there's, subconscious blocks, and, see someone who does, some kind of work in this area. It doesn't have to be a psychologist. It could be someone who could help identify the limiting beliefs. That's the key thing. This is mostly what I do in my office. If people come in here with recurring same old, what is the belief that's creating that? Let's reprogram it. And I usually do it, of course, in a hypnotic state with people, and then teach them how to do self-hypnosis so they can do it on their own. That is the key.
What is the difference between visualization, where we're conscious, we're relaxing and going to a visualization, and self-hypnosis? There must be some crossover and some distinct differences.
Well, that's a tough question to answer because, one kind of bleeds into the other. With visualization, you can do it in a fairly light state. Some people who, can go into fairly profound relaxation states. The electrical language of the brain does change with hypnosis. You get an excessive theta and alpha spikes. With visualization, you get mostly alpha. So that might be the difference. Getting into that theta range, that twilight, that creative state, that's where creativity comes from, is from theta.